Hi, Catherine. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. With a movie like this, I have to say, Air Force One is one of my favorite movies ever. So it does make me happy to see that we're still like diving into like we have to save the president storylines.
Yeah,
But what I like about this one is a woman gets to be the one who's like, I'm the lone survivor of the CIA.
we get
It's,
the job done.
but when you guys are kind of, building that president and CIA operative relationship. And though this movie does kind of blur the lines a little bit, what for you was the fun of like getting to everything in and like build out that like what a CIA agent's relationship to the president would kind of look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've known Ian for almost 10 years now, but we've never actually worked together. So I was excited because it is someone that I genuinely enjoy spending time with, that I get to work with is just a treat and a half. And we very quickly worked out that we work in a very similar way.
Mhm.
Which is just the icing on the cake, so we really could just dive in and play. But what's so interesting about these two characters is they're not your typical president and you're not your typical Secret Service Marine agent person. She has many titles, but it's one of those things where we did have a chance to play because neither one is stereotypical. He's a president who's going about and trying to change the way things are done in the way that he is perceived. And she's a woman who's kind of breaking boundaries, but she's also a little bit of a weirdo and a little bit of a lovable nerd and just really loves her job and wants to do a good job. And I think there's certain elements of we really tried to balance the drama and the gravity with a little bit of levity as well. Because when you're in a crisis situation, there's going to be levity. There's going to be weird, awkward moments. There's going to be these human things that bubble to the surface as your mind and your psyche is trying to cope with everything that's happening. And being able to go on that roller coaster ride with them, and then physically also go on this roller coaster ride with them, it was really nice balance that I think Bam did an amazing job of finding.
Yeah, and I do like, I mean, it is cheesy at times in the best way. Like the fact that her uncle's name is Uncle Sam is
Yeah.
just great because you're like, that works for this movie. I'm fully on board with the fact that her uncle, who works for the president, is known as Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
But you do get to work with like Anthony Michael Hall, which anyone who loves 80s movies is instantly like, what's Anthony Michael Hall gonna do?
Yeah.
And when you their relationship's also not like a typical niece and uncle kind of thing. What did you guys kind of do to like try and establish more of that connection so that when we do get those brief moments with them, we fully understand how they work as a family?
Well, it's funny how small the world can be. I actually did a movie with Anthony about 13 years ago. And I didn't get to work with him very much because he was in kind of a different storyline. But I remember meeting him so long ago when I was first starting out on camera, just coming out of theater. And I remember how kind he was and how lovely he was. And we've, loosely kept in touch over the years. And the fact that he was the one they got for this film, it was nice to just catch up. And we had a lot of time to and a few group dinners to sit and go, okay, fill me in on the last 13 years of your life and what's been going on. And it was a really nice way to kind of rekindle that. And he's such a lovely, warm human being. But I think it was important for both of us to establish that relationship because then, not to spoil anything, but as the events of the film take place, it's important that that relationship means something. Otherwise, the rest of the film doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't remember if it was said. There was a lot going on. But this is a single president, right? Like he's not married. So
Yes.
it's weird for in our standard because most of the time the president has a wife.
Yeah. So just to catch up on the story, his wife had passed away when he was right before he started campaigning as president. So when he was a senator or a governor or whatever he was before, and that was kind of part of his campaign of, I'm going through stuff, but I'm still here for my country. Kind of,
Yeah.
he got elected.
Okay, because I was going to say there are moments in this movie where I was like, am I supposed to be rooting for these two as maybe a couple? Or is that just the stakes of the situation have gotten very high and they're just kind of coping?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely something we played with because, as we know about human nature, when you do go through a traumatic situation with someone and your emotions are so heightened and you are relying on each other like that, it's not uncommon for a little bit of a romance to spark because of that. Because there is a certain intensity and proximity that comes with those situations. And, given the fact that these two surprise each other and really build up a respect for each other that I don't think either one of them really expected. I think it does take both of them by surprise, but they're both very bound by duty.
Mhm.
And it's more, we wanted to pose the question of what might happen after the film and what might happen after the situation settles out and what their future could possibly be together or apart.
Yeah. And I don't want to spoil anything, but I do like that she has this shoot first, ask questions later kind of mentality throughout this movie, especially towards the end. Um, when you are playing a character that is kind of so just like quick to react to something, and she may have not been right, but she like just thought she was, and in that case, she was correct. But like when you're playing a character like that who is so kind of driven by just like instinct versus, the emotions that
Mhm.
we as humans kind of tend to lean more on, what is the fun of getting to play like to put all of the emotional stuff to the side and focus only on like just reacting to something?
It's interesting because I think that's just very much a factor of her training and of who she is. She's very good at her job. She knows what her job is. And I was raised around a lot of military folks, and that really is the job. You have to learn to set your emotions aside and rely on your training and on your instincts and on what your job is to do and the observations that you make and the pieces that you put together. And that's just very much who she is as a person. That's how she perceives the world. And it's always a fun thing to do, but it plays into why it's so important to me to do most of my own stunts in these films because the physicality and that sort of action orientation that, shoot first, ask questions later kind of attitude is so a part of who Allison is.
Mhm.
And I'm just, I got to work with the absolutely incredible stunt team, and about all but 6 shots of the film, of the action of the film, is me. So, they don't let me get hit by a car. They don't let me go through a wall. They don't let my amazing stunt double, Melissa Holmer, did all of those incredible things for me. And I'm so grateful to her. Um, but yeah, but the rest of all of the actual combat was me, which I was so grateful to actually get to do.
That's so cool. And I mean, I made a joke about Air Force One, but there are so many movies that kind of this, I was like, oh, like that reminds me of this movie. It reminds me of this movie. Like when they
Yeah.
started having a romance, I was like, this is like American President. Like there are just so many things that I kind of pulled from. Were there any movies that you guys watched in preparation to try and kind of nail down the tone of it's about the president, but it's still kind of its own action thriller at the same time?
Yeah, I'm trying to think back because I did go back through and watch a couple of series and films, and I'm forgetting what they are. I did go back and watch a bit of Veep as well because that show just makes me happy. And trying to find those moments of humanity and those moments of comedy as well. But there are certain themes and certain tones of films that are so classic and well known, and I've gotten to do a lot of projects that are very classic in what their genre is, whether it's a western or a vampire supernatural show or an action film that you're saving the president.
Mhm.
There's certain things that are just familiar to audiences, and that I love it in that way because it opens the door to the audience to go, oh, I know, I'm familiar with this, I know what to expect, I'm open to this, and then you get to surprise them by doing something new in that space. And I think that's really the key to a lot of successful projects these days.
Yeah, and going back briefly to the action stuff. So you've done action in the past, like I know that, but when you are getting to, put the physicality in with a character, is there like a process that you use as an actor to kind of find how that specific character would react to someone coming straight at them with a punch, even if they are trained, or like how they hold the gun versus how like a different character would hold the gun?
Yeah, well, I mean, this it's just training. It's all training, and because a lot of doing your own action and doing your own stunts comes down to a safety issue because you
Mhm.
have to be able to be more adept than your character at anything that you're doing, just for the sake of, if something happens on set, you have to be able to keep yourself and everyone else around you as safe as possible. And this project, however, was very different than any other one I've done. Rather than being, a girl who finds out she's a supernatural creature at 18 and somehow happens to have some skills, or someone who's trained their whole life and knows how to shoot a bow and arrow. She's a Marine. She's been trained. She knows she is the top of her class at firearms and combat and weapons work and martial arts and everything else that she should be able to do. And so I only had 3.5 weeks before we started shooting this film. So I threw myself into training full stop. Also, I'm a naturally very, tiny ballerina limbed human being. And to be able to pack on muscle and look like a Marine in 3.5 weeks is not an easy feat. So
Yeah.
that was being in the gym twice a day lifting, and then also doing firearms training or martial arts training or knife work training or whatever it was. Also multiple different kind of workshops every day for 3.5 weeks. And then going to Bulgaria where we were shooting, I had 5 days, 5 10-hour days to learn all 5 fights with the stunt team before we went to camera. And it was a massive undertaking, but I thrive on a challenge and I thrive on hard work. And it was some of my favorite work I've ever done.
When it pays off too, because it like you believe it when you're watching a movie like that you're like, well, yes, she could do that stuff. But what I also love about, stories that have to do with the president, they can't ever make things look like the actual Oval Office, or they can't look like actual rooms because it's like, well, that's a safety hazard for the actual president.
Yeah.
What for you is the most fun like aspects in that way that you got to see? Like, how did you guys adapt to like what you can and cannot do when telling a story about the president?
Well, what I found the most interesting and the most fascinating was the airplane set, because it was inside a soundstage. They had built this sort of replica of an airplane that was maybe one and a quarter size larger than an actual airplane, because you have to be able to fit cameras and people and lights and things inside of it. But every wall was movable, everything was kind of changeable. And I've never been on Air Force One, so I don't know what it looks like, but it makes a lot of sense when you kind of go through this. I just love immersive set pieces. And just the fact that you're like, oh, I'm sitting in an actual airplane seat, but then I look out the window and there's a camera on a dolly, and I'm going, yeah, this is my job. This is normal. But again, it's a testament to the artistry and to the mastery of every single department. And we were shooting on this studio lot in Bulgaria, and I was just floored by it. They had absolutely everything. We only left the lot once, and that was to go shoot up in the mountains a mile away. So we had everything we possibly needed, and this crew was incredible. The stunt team blew my mind away, and we were just so happy to be able to tell this story to such a high level.
Yeah, and for last question, with movies like this that are people normally go into because they're like, yeah, I'll watch an action movie, and that's kind of like the extent of their knowledge.
Yeah.
What do you hope that they take away when they get to see it and see the different layers that Air Force Down kind of brings?
Yeah, when people go see Air Force One Down, I hope that they take away this sort of spirit of tenacity. And when you think that you are at the bottom of the barrel, there's still a little bit of gas in your tank. And not to let anyone judge you by what you look like or what they expect from you. You are the only person who can limit your expectations for yourself and your abilities. And I think tenacity would do all of us a little bit of good right about now.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Have a good one. Bye.